All right, everybody. I'm supposedly live, so let me know in the chat if you can hear me and see me. Thank you so much for being here on another Monday night to discuss some of the things that have happened this past week and to give you some ideas about survival lessons that we can learn from a lot of the activities that have gone on. Because the main thing you should be doing when you're ingesting all this information and receiving all this news is applying it to your preparedness strategy and using it for learning more so than anything else, because you can dive right into bad news all day long and literally never have any kind of a positive thought process, or you can just learn something from it and move on into your preparedness, which is exactly what we should be trying to do. Now, people are saying 2x4 actually in the chat. Strangely enough, on my screen, it's as if the chat hasn't even started yet. So let me jump back on here, and there we go. Maybe refresh your screen in case anything weird's happening, because something was just weird, happening for me. Now, let's go ahead and say hello to some people. We got Harbor Preppers here. Welcome to My Life is here. We got Dave Sickles, Benjamin, Joe, Andrew. Anyone can be paid off. That is true. And that's just how real life works, right? We have Annie Goraljic. I'm going to say that I tried my best there. So thank you for being here, Annie. We got DM as well. So good to see everybody. And obviously a lot of interesting things have happened. And I'm going to do my best to talk about some of those things, give you some other information that's maybe not being discussed as frequently right now, and talk about some of the lessons we can learn from what just happened, okay? So, and if you're here for the replay, well, thank you for being here. And make sure, you try to tune in live if you can, so you can get in the chat and talk to other people. But if not, I appreciate you checking it out on the flip side, which is something I guess proves that I'm from the 90s. So, let's see here. First thing is first, all right? So we all saw the thumbnail tonight. We are doing it the best way we can. All right. Missing in action. Putin and Prigozhin not seen for over 36 hours. That is old news at this point, okay? At the time of this article being produced, which was yesterday, they had not been seen since the entire mutiny thing happened. But there's more to this situation than just talking about whether or not these two guys are still around. What we're talking about here is exactly what you see in the thumbnail and exactly what you see in these photos. This is something that you should not do. In a survival situation, in a martial law situation, in a wartime scenario, as a civilian or as somebody who's not in uniform, let's just say, associating with whoever could be very problematic for you, especially when we're talking about a rebellious force that's entering Russian territory and claims to be on their way towards the capital in an armed sense, in the sense of shooting down helicopters on their way through Russia, right? So one thing you should definitely take away from this situation, before we get into more of the details regarding this whole scenario, is that be careful about how you interact with any invading force, any occupying force, any type of political entity during a wartime situation. These people taking selfies and photos with these prominent figures are literally plastering their faces all over the news, as you can see right now, and saying, hey, come arrest me, or come interrogate me, or come deal the consequences to me after all of this settles down. If you don't think that Russia will have a very similar approach to, I don't know, stuff that happened here back in January of 2021, then I think you're very mistaken about how authoritarian regimes tend to work. These people are going to, at the very least, be put on a list, right? So don't interact with the very first group of people that come through claiming to be your saviors, right? This is putting all these people, we got this guy, selfie guy, we got tank girl here, we got all kinds of pictures of this kind of stuff with civilians and with even Russian security forces members handing out food, water, all kinds of stuff. The big takeaway from this exact situation is don't put yourself out there on a billboard when you don't have the full picture painted for you yet. These people were not aware of the fact that this would be over within, an hour after they took the selfie, within an hour after these things started to happen. And then now they are easily marked for being a possible insurrectionist at some point in the future, and who knows what else they might be put on in the sense of a list, right? So this is important information in the sense of how you would prepare when these types of scenarios are unfolding. Don't just jump out to whoever comes through first. It could be a big problem for you thereafter, and it could be an issue for you there immediately. Just too many unknown factors. All these people were way too excited about the entire situation and way too willing to go out there and put their face, alongside of these other people that were technically invoking a mutiny. I mean, I don't know what else to say. So, look, there's more to this we're going to talk about here, but this was an important situation that was happening, and I wanted to really bring attention to the fact that these regular people were getting involved with something that was much more dangerous and complicated than what they realized, and they may not recover from it as easily as the people who are involved, okay? And like I said, this is very reminiscent of some of the things that happened here in our country during some of our political upheaval, and, however you feel about that isn't really relevant to this conversation. What's relevant is that these people were immediately putting themselves out there as supporting this coup attempt in many ways, and now they have digital footprints of all of the interactions they had with these private military contractors, and it can easily be investigated here into the future. And especially when you live somewhere like Russia, why would you want to be part of that scenario, right? Why would you want to put yourself out there to be blacklisted by the FSB or something along those lines? So keep this in mind, okay? We have all these people who are just like, yeah, good for you guys, right? And now it's already over. I mean, those guys aren't going to, come protect them afterward or come make sure that they don't get arrested or put away in prison for, being supportive of the cause or whatever. I'm just throwing it out there as a regular person. It's just like like I said, a civilian, a citizen of a country, somebody who's not in uniform. I would not do this if I didn't have to, right? I think you should keep your OPSEC during these times as best you can, and getting involved with these groups, regardless of how you feel about them ideologically or politically or whatever it may be. It is not in your best interest to go out there and literally put pictures of yourself all over the entire internet of you supporting the changing of the current regime. It's kind of a dangerous precedent you're setting for yourself. And what's interesting about it is that these people are unlikely to have any kind of defense mechanisms in place to protect themselves from further persecution in the future. Just wanted to bring that up, okay? So this is all important information in that regard. This is some of the biggest takeaways. Don't do what these people were doing, okay? Don't pose for pictures. Don't go out and meet people that you think are there to help you or you think are there to fight for a righteous cause, because in the next 24 hours, things could change immediately. And that's exactly what we learned from this situation. Regardless of how anything else is related in the sense of geopolitical maneuvers and everything else that's been going on in that region, the biggest takeaway is don't be these people. Don't be Tank Girl, okay? Stay away from it until we know for sure what's happening. And then once you know for sure what's happening and you want to choose a side, well, you can do that a lot more strategically than just rushing out into the streets in your street clothes and going, hey guys, I really like what you're doing here, right? So let me know what your thoughts are on that in the chat, because I want to approach these stories as best I can from a preparedness standpoint. If we're only talking about the news because it's scary, it's uncertain, things are happening, who knows what can happen next, right? It's not productive necessarily. When we analyze these events and then apply the information we learn to our preparedness strategy, now we're talking about solutions, or at least thought processes that we can apply in the future for problems that might arise. And so that's what I'm trying to do here, okay? Now, let's see. DM is mentioning the $6.2 billion and all that things, all that stuff related to that. Listen, everything related to what's happening there is speculation at this point in time, regardless of who says they know what, and regardless of who's saying it. Doesn't matter if it's coming from the east, from the west. Doesn't matter if it's coming directly from Russia or directly from Washington, D.C. All of it's speculation as of right now, and we may never find out what actually happened fully. But what I can say is we can prove that here in just a minute to kind of just show how easy this back and forth works and how this chaos and this confusion plays into everybody's favor when it comes to war, except for the regular person, right? We're the ones who lose out when there's this level of chaos and confusion. It works best for militaries on all sides, actually, not just one or the other. And then there was coffee. All right, so Jason Gross said, I heard it was a timeshare at Disney. Well, yeah, I heard that their Star Wars hotel is already being shut down, so maybe that's what happened. That was just a giant laundering facility for this conflict. Who knows, right? I have no idea what Disney's up to these days. So, what caused all this, or what's been going on since then? Let's get into that a little bit, just so everybody's on the same page. So, We had Yevgeny Prigozhin come out and say, hey, we only did this as kind of like a justification type parade. We wanted to let everyone know that we were upset about how we were treated. We want to let everybody know that, we needed justice, and we're going to walk to Moscow as a parade of justice, basically. And that's what he said in an 11-minute audio clip that was released on Telegram. I did listen to the clip, which means I translated it into a translating program so I could actually read what was said. And of course, that was sketchy at best, because I'm certain he didn't reference hot dogs as many times as the translator tried to tell me he did, but maybe they just really like hot dogs. I don't know. Either way, he's saying we started our march because of an injustice. Okay, so like I said, that initial article was out of date at this point in time, because those two men are at least out there in the ether. We know that they exist. We don't necessarily know exactly where they are, but we also know that they are putting out videos and audio clips and everything else. So that was more to reference the initial reaction of the average person and how you should avoid that type of behavior in any kind of a immediate scenario. Anything that has just happened and just started, probably avoid it. Not the best place to go put your face on a billboard at. Okay? Now, uncertainty swirled about his fate, and they're talking about Prigozhin, as well as that of a rebellion leader. Oh, Prigozhin, that's who we're talking about now, rather than Shoigu. And his private army, the impact on the war in Ukraine, and even the political future of Vladimir Putin. And then this thing just jumped all the way to the top of the screen for some reason. And let's see here. Basically, this article just talks about what he said, and then it also talked about how he had to shoot down helicopters and how they didn't want to spill any blood, but they did have to kill, I think it was at least 30 people in this mutiny that they were trying to accomplish, which then they went ahead and said was not a mutiny and was just trying to raise awareness about the injustices that the Wagner Group has experienced throughout their time in Ukraine. So, regardless, this is not that important. This is all just hearsay of what some guy posted on Telegram and just ranted on for about 11 minutes. But the main thing there was for me to let you know that, at least from their point of view, this wasn't a mutiny and this wasn't necessarily an insurrection, and that, yes, they are standing down and this is no longer an issue, okay? And then Putin came on and addressed the nation here just recently today and basically said, that any of these traitors are going to be punished. There's going to be some kind of reciprocation at some point in time, but then also offered for members of the Wagner Group to either return home, join the Ministry of Defense, or to actually move to Belarus, where they're reestablishing their base of operations, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. So either way, the people behind the mutiny betrayed their country and those who they pulled into treachery. Putin mentioned the Wagner Group called the mercenaries patriots of Russia, loyal to their nation and state, adding that they were exploited and made to go against their brothers in arms. The president also mentioned the Russian pilots killed during the mutiny, thus confirming their deaths. He did not provide any details. Putin thanked the mercenaries who made the only right decision and stopped before reaching the point of no return. He offered them several options: sign a contract with the Russian Defense Ministry, go home to their families, or leave for Belarus. I don't believe it's going to be that simple, but I do believe that that was the agreement that was initially brokered. And the interesting things about agreements is that they can change over time depending on who you're working with, especially if you're working with somebody like Darth Vader. So it is what it is for right now, but we'll see if this actually sticks. But this just goes to show you that both the people involved with this, Prigozhin and Putin, were, at least at some point in time, like in existence, more so than just missing for 36 hours that the initial article said. Now, the U.S. gathered detailed intelligence on Wagner Chief's rebellion plans, but kept it secret from most allies. Now, the first couple articles we just went over actually mentioned this later on in their articles, but this is specifically about that. Yes, this is from CNN. Interestingly enough, this was on their front page, whereas nothing related to this was really on Fox News' front page, which I found interesting. And I am just bouncing back and forth between mainstream media at times just to see what they're talking about. And then, of course, we're talking about alternative media as well as foreign media just to try to get a full picture, which is hard to do these days, okay? But according to Washington CNN, U.S. intelligence officials were able to gather an extremely detailed and accurate picture of Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin's plans leading up to his short-lived rebellion, including where and how Wagner was planning to advance. Sources familiar with the matter told CNN. But the intelligence was so closely held that it was shared only with select allies, including senior British officials, and not at the broader NATO level. It was not clear exactly when Prigozhin would act, the sources said, but he appears to have decided to move forward with his plan following a June 10th declaration by Russia's Ministry of Defense that all private military companies, including Wagner, would be forced to sign contracts with Russia's military beginning in July and essentially be absorbed by the Russian Ministry of Defense. the biggest thing here is that, yes, their livelihoods are being threatened. Their existence as a group is being threatened in the sense of their contracts being terminated come July, which is really what a lot of this was probably about. But like I said, I don't know for sure. But another thing to keep in mind is that we were aware of it, okay? Which means, however you want to look at it, we either let it happen, we were involved with it, whatever it was, somehow we were aware of it and others weren't, which means there are others out there who aren't going to be happy about that information. And that's something you should definitely keep in mind. So, it just goes on to talk about how all this stuff was going on and everything else related to it. But in reality, the only important part of that article to keep in mind was the fact that we had intelligence saying that this was going to happen, and then it happened. So even if that's, I don't know, some kind of falsified information in order to push a narrative or an agenda of some kind or whatever it is, either way, that signals to Russia and that signals to those in the East that we have people involved with certain aspects of these conflicts that give us the information we need in order to find out things ahead of time, which means we can strategize better, which means we can then capitalize on said movements, right? And this is something we're going to talk about here a little bit later in the chat, but it reminds you that even if you're part of this organized force, you're part of this private military company, or you're part of the Ministry of Defense, right, or you're in the U.S. military as, you know, an analogy of it. Either way, if you're in any type of organization, especially related to national security or national defense, there's always the chance and the possibility and probably the likelihood that someone in your organization has ulterior motives, or someone in your organization might be working for the other side, right? And we know that that's happened time and time again throughout history. It's happening right now as well, and it should be expected to happen if you ever had something with your personal group, in the sense of like your MAG or your community, right? If you think every single member of your community would stay true and strong during some type of tribulation that required a level of patriotism that was willing to suffer in order to make it through a difficult situation, then you're definitely being optimistic, because in all honesty, somebody's going to crack. Somebody's going to become a collaborator, and somebody's going to do what they feels best for them and their family, even if it means selling out their core values. So keep that in mind, because that is definitely something that's going to be discussed and probably happen during any type of survival scenario. So, all right. Tactic Squirrel says, I believe all are involved, from Putin to whoever has Robot Sniffy's controller. You know what? Man, there's a lot to unpack there, let's be honest. Now, let's see here. Maxie says, that coup was weird. And that's because it wasn't really a coup. And that's what was weird about it. There's a lot of weirdness going on there. And I think if you wanted to have a perfect demonstration of the fog of war, this coup situation was just that. Nothing could technically be believed coming out of Russia at that point, and nothing could be believed coming out of Ukraine or the Wagner Group, right? Everything was just information. It didn't mean it was verifiable. It didn't mean it was valid. All it meant is a lot of things are happening, and we're not really sure what they are. And a lot of different interesting situations could have actually unfolded during that time that none of us were aware of because of all the chaos and confusion, which is why it's such a powerful tool to use during a wartime situation, right? Chaos and confusion are some of the most powerful tools known to man, because during those times of chaos and confusion, a lot can be accomplished in a short amount of time without anybody noticing. So always keep that in mind. Bees Nuts, good to see you. Chris Penton, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Desert 1776, good to see you as well. Derek Boodle, a Mini Coupe, that's right. And if anyone had anything to do with it, I would say it would be Mini Cooper, because their cars are something else. All right, now, I mean, I guess if I saw one with a technical on it, I would get kind of excited. So no complaints. Let's not complain about it. All right. Now, this came out from a Russian news media source, and I'm going to share it with everybody because it is a little bit concerning. And the reason I just talked about the U.S. having that prior intelligence and being aware of these things is because regardless of what it is we're actually doing over there, to those who are part of the pro-Russian campaign, we're just escalators. We're provocateurs. We are a huge problem, right? And us having that information ahead of time and letting these things happen the way they did, or whatever you want to call it, could easily be seen as further provocation, right? Because if the U.S. just said, Ah, well, like we knew, for example, there would be some kind of an attack on like a civilian structure, but we didn't tell you because we don't like you guys, and a lot of people lost their lives because of it. A lot of countries would almost feel like that's an act of war in its own, right? Or an act of war by proxy. So you can understand why these things are escalating in the sense of nuclear discussions, right? There's no choice left. Russia will have to launch a nuclear strike on Europe. This article just came out today, or actually yesterday. If you can't read European dates, that's that's unfortunate because they get weird sometimes. But usually it's 2506 is how it would have read. So, anyway, this is from Sergei Karaganov, and he's part of the Russian Security Council, I believe. And basically, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. But what he's trying to say is that they need to use nuclear weapons before it's too late. And so, let's see here. All right, here we are. This is the part that's pretty important. I hope that we never use nuclear weapons, but that we refuse the possibility of using them in all situations, except in the event of a mortal danger to the state itself. Seems to me frivolous. Okay? Thus, the states tie the hands of Russia and hope in the long run to blow it up with this long war. Well, and as a result, to radically weaken its main rival, China, which in case will be alone. This is a strategic intent that is absolutely understandable. Well, in parallel, the Americans, having already thrown the Ukrainian people into the furnace, are pushing Europe there, destroying the positions that it has occupied for 5 centuries. They are thus solving another problem. They are destroying the old world as a strategic player and potential strategic competitor. In turn, the comprador European elites are driving their countries and peoples to the slaughter. I want to believe that our opponents will come to their senses, because if not, then the military political leadership of Russia will face a terrible moral choice and the need to make difficult decisions. But I believe that our president respects his determination to use nuclear weapons. However, the question arises, who can and should be the target of such an attack? The Americans, as we all know, shamelessly lied, saying that we were preparing for strikes against Ukraine. This is a monstrous, senseless, malicious, because of course Ukrainians are an unfortunate, deceived people who are being driven to the slaughter. But still, these are our people, we will not hit them. If it comes to nuclear strikes, then we should talk about a number of countries in Europe that provide the greatest assistance to the Kiev mercenary regime. Fortunately, we have begun to take steps up the ladder of nuclear deterrence, but we need to move faster and more decisively. Although, of course, the use of nuclear weapons is a monstrous step, it should be avoided if possible. But as the vector of development of the West, its elites and society, their movement towards anti-human and post-human values shows all this clearly indicates an objective approach to a big thermonuclear war. We must interrupt this process and thus save the world. If possible, of course, avoiding super tough actions. We have time, but we need to understand that it is quite short. We must use these few years ahead to solve the problem of the West, to force it to step back and mind its own business, because now it is trying, without solving its problems, to start wars around the world. Okay? So, it goes on and on about more of that topic, but at the end of this article and at the end of the day, this guy's whole explanation is, we need to use nukes. And if we wait too long, it'll be too late. And from his point of view, they would be saving the world from us by doing so, or from the West in general. I don't necessarily think that this is a good place for anyone to be, right? I don't like that people who have these higher up positions or have this influence on these boards and councils that actually make decisions related to national security and things of that nature. I don't like that they're being pushed to the idea that maybe nuclear war is a necessary action. Maybe it's something that we need to consider. Maybe mutually assured destruction is no longer on the table because destruction is happening anyway, and why should it be allowed to happen just because we don't want to use the weapons we actually have access to, right? So, I don't agree with this person, but what I'm trying to say is that this is their point of view, or at least it's shared by many over there who have access to the weapons that would allow for these types of things to happen. And this should definitely concern everybody because I don't want to see a nuclear war, and I'm sure you don't either. Water Tiger says, too late for what? And what he's referring to is it'll be too late for them to actually launch an attack before they don't have enough strength left, basically, is what it sounds like to me. Understand that countries like Russia and China, they don't have much time left before they just eventually get left in the dust in some ways. Look, China is a manufacturing powerhouse, but they need resources and they need buyers in order for that to matter. Okay? Russia is a natural resource conglomerate that can power itself for centuries on end. But if it doesn't have anyone to sell any of those resources to, it becomes very poor very quickly, right? The United States, well, because of our investments, especially militarily, we're going to do whatever we want for a very long time if nobody stops us. And that's not me saying that because I'm American. That just seems to be the way things are. I don't think we should be out there starting wars or having proxy wars or getting involved with some of these foreign conflicts and spending money like it doesn't exist, because I guess it technically doesn't. But you know what I'm trying to say is that these aren't things that I necessarily want to see happening. But in reality, as of right now, at the current power level that all these countries are at, the United States is definitely still on top. And if they don't do something before that gap either widens due to economic issues or due to socioeconomic issues, right? They might not ever have another opportunity. So it's kind of a scary next couple of years, especially with the whole election cycle coming up, because we all know that's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be ludicrous, like ludicrous Rick Moranis style. Like, I don't even know what to say about it, but it's going to be great. So, Maxie, China's running low on food and water with such a big population. Well, that's true, but China also is having population issues because of some of their bad decisions back in the day when it came to limiting the amount of people that they were allowed to birth, right? Population sounds big until you realize just how big land is. And then you realize that population is actually one of the only things that separates countries from the next one. And if you don't have enough people to keep moving into the future, then eventually you won't be in the future. Does that make sense? I don't know. Anyway, let's see here. Let's talk about some of the back and forth we've been having here and something else we can learn from this current conflict and scenario. There will be no one obviously to blame, okay? This won't be like World War II. There won't be Japanese Zeros bombing Pearl Harbor with obvious Japanese flags painted on their ships, or planes, if you want to call them that instead. And there won't be this obvious, like, they did it, okay? We are in a whole different world now. And here's why. And this is exactly what we should be paying attention to here. Because if something happens at the Zaporizhzhia power plant, no one will be able to know for sure who did it. And that won't matter. Because both sides are going to move forward based on whatever they want to say. And that's what sucks about it the most. Because anyone can do this now. And it doesn't change anything. Okay? Ukraine war. Now, this is from June 23rd. Okay? So, just a few days ago. Zelensky warns a possible Russian terrorist attack at Zaporizhzhia plant. IAEA spots no new mines at site. Okay? All right. Key developments. Kind of like this. They just break it down nice and easy for us here. Russia considers radiation leak at Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Explosions reported in occupied Crimea. Russian proxies claim Ukraine hit bridge connecting Crimea to mainland Ukraine. And EU provides $1.6 billion to Ukraine. Nice little bullet points. Okay? Now, according to President Vladimir Zelensky, Russia is considering a terrorist attack at the occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Our intelligence obtained information that Russia is considering a scenario of a terrorist attack at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, a terrorist attack with radiation leakage. They have prepared everything for this. Zelensky warned that Russia was willing to conduct similar terrorist attacks as the June 6th Kharkovka dam explosion. Ukraine's military intelligence chief Kirilo Budanov, we're just going to go with it. It sounds cool, like a Star Wars character, told national television on June 20th that the Russian forces have planted additional mines in and around Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, including the cooling pond. The worst thing is that Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was additionally mined during this time. The cooling pond was mined. If they disabled it by blowing it up, there's a high probability there would be significant problems, okay? So, this is what was being said just a few days ago. Now, let's pop back in the past just a little bit here. This is from May. So this is just from 1 month ago. Russia accuses Ukraine of nuclear terrorism after failed attack on 2 nuclear power plants. Okay? Federal Security Service claims Ukrainian saboteurs blew up 1 mined 30 pillars supplying energy to nuclear power plants to break up reactors. So a month ago, we're talking about the Russians saying that Ukrainian saboteurs blew up and mined 30 pillars supplying energy to a nuclear power plant. Okay? The Russian Federal Security Service claimed on Thursday that it thwarted It thwarted a terrorist attack on 2 nuclear power stations prepared by Ukraine's intelligence and accused Kiev of nuclear terrorism. In a statement on its website, the FSB said a sabotage group mined over 30 electric power lines supplying energy to Leningrad and Kalinin nuclear power plants in order to break the normal operating mode and eventually damage the nuclear reactors. The Russian security service dubbed the attack as nuclear terrorism, adding that the attack was scheduled for May 9th when Russia celebrates its victory in World War II, which is called Russia the Great Patriotic War. Okay. That was a month ago. Let's go back, I don't know, like 7 months. How about that? Ukraine warns of nuclear terrorism after strike near plant. September 19th, 2022. A Russian missile blasted a crater close to a nuclear power plant in southern Ukraine on Monday, damaging nearby industrial equipment but not hitting its 3 reactors. Ukrainian authorities denounced the move as an act of nuclear terrorism. The missile struck within 300 meters of the reactors at the South Ukraine nuclear power plant near the city of Yuzhno-Kuraksk in Mykolaiv province, leaving a hole 2 meters deep and 4 meters wide, according to Ukrainian nuclear operator Energoatom. Whatever. The reactors were operating normally and no employees were injured, it said, but the proximity of the strike renewed fears that Russia's nearly 7-month-long war in Ukraine might produce a radiation disaster. So, all I'm trying to say is that we won't know who did what. Both sides have accused each other of the exact same strategy and the exact same behavior multiple times throughout this conflict, but all we know is that there's a lot of talk about nuclear incidents at the Zaporizhzhia power plant. There's a lot of talk about saboteurs and mining, and there's a lot of talk about a possible incident leading to a nuclear exchange thanks to recent conversations had here in the United States by some of our lovely senators. So keep all of that in mind. Because if you wanted to escalate this war and you wanted to pull off a Hail Mary scenario, attacking the power plant would probably be the best bet. Because no one can actually take the blame. The blame can be placed on anyone at this point because both sides have been accused of the same exact behavior. All that matters is who believes who. In the West, we'll believe Ukraine, and in the East, they'll believe Russia. And that won't matter if nuclear weapons start to fly. So, Oki Khan, Ukraine has a Kool-Aid salesman. Okay. You know what? I don't think I caught the rest of that conversation, but I'm okay with it. There's 556 people in the chat right now. Now there's 560. Good to see everybody. I really appreciate it. Yardbirds, my Russian is pretty good. I think he might be a sleeper agent. Just saying. You know what? I've been working on it, just in case anything like that ever happens. I speak Spanish pretty well. I could say we'll call it relatively fluent, and that was in preparation for, Cuba and parts of South America invading the mainland U.S. During a Red Dawn type scenario. But the Russian part I kind of screwed up on. I didn't really learn very much of it. So I'll start working on that. But Mandarin might be important too. Not sure, but it's something that I've considered. Not easy to learn either. So South Florida DCL, once the nukes fly, no one will give a you-know-what. So, and you know what? Agreed. And unfortunately, it won't matter. Exactly. So that's what I'm trying to say is that all these moving parts and all this blame and everything that's happening, in the end, it won't matter. If someone has a plan right now to launch nuclear weapons at some point in time based on whatever red line might be crossed or just based on, I don't know, a date that they have in a book somewhere, they're going to do it because it won't matter. They'll have every justification they want because who will actually know? Especially here in the West. Who here is going to actually know if the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant has been hit by something or not? Right? We won't. Unless someone physically calls you from the plant, like on a video conference, and is like, this is the plant. Look at it right now. I'm here. Everything's fine. I don't understand what's happening. But the entire Western media is like, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant attacked. Radiation leak confirmed. This is a nuclear escalation, and now the only response is nuclear. Right? So, I could definitely see that happening. Be ready for that. All right. Now, while we're here, let's do this. I'm going to, first off, thank Midway USA for supporting the channel and being the biggest supporter of the channel. So a big thanks to them, always helping me out with my preparedness needs. And of course, now that I have my own shooting range, it helps out a lot that they have a pretty sizable ammunition supply. So thank you to Midway USA. And then I do want to mention I was going to do something like today. We'll do the affiliate I'm working with that we'll throw in the chat will be Premier Body Armor. If you need good body armor solutions, including plate carriers and level 4 rifle plates and everything else, check them out. And then if you use the code MAGIC, you get 10% off. So I like body armor. I also hate body armor. You know why? Because it's heavy. And I'm just not, like, I don't know why people lie about things. Like, oh, it's not that heavy. It sucks to wear. 100%. Don't care. It just does. Much rather wear a chest rig. But you know what? There are times where I want body armor on. And one thing that they have that's cool is that undercover t-shirt style body armor where it's a level 3/8 insert that goes in a compression shirt. And what I like about that is that, I mean, I can wear that if I'm going to go somewhere that I feel like might be more sketchy. And it at least gives me a little bit higher level of protection. And it's kind of like a gray man, Minuteman type of deal. Like I'm gray man, no one knows what I got going on, but like I'm wearing armor and no one even needs to know. And if I need to activate, I can activate. I feel like I have some level of protection. I like that quite a bit. So make sure you guys check them out in case you're interested in that. Benjamin says steel plates all day. Look, man, I know everybody talks about steel plates, this or that, whatever. Spall, it does do what it's supposed to do. Will steel plates possibly lead to you having, shrapnel or whatever? Yeah, sure. But I am so happy that some people have those than nothing, right? Like, it's such a thing. Like, yes, there are issues with steel plates, of course. That's why they're less expensive and heavier, okay? But they also last forever. They don't have an expiration date. And guess what? They're way more affordable. And, oh no, there's some spall from, the rifle round that I took to the chest, and now it's cutting my chin really bad. But I didn't take a rifle round to the chest, so... oh no, I'll be upset because I have a scar on my chin now. I don't know. You understand what I'm trying to say. Anyway, Grisio Nemo, it is the exact armor for going to Walmart, especially if you live in, I don't know, any of the major cities in the entire country now. And you know what's interesting? It used to be like all these Democrat-run cities, all these blue cities, right? They're falling apart. It's not. It's really not just Democrat-run cities. It's all major cities. It's really hard to get a hold of a large population like that, and especially in economic downturns and everything else, like, just, there are cities that are better than others, don't get me wrong. Like, I would never even go to Chicago at this point in time. Even if someone said, we'll give you $1 million a year to come work for us here in Chicago, I'd be like, nah, guess not. Money sounds great, but I like being alive. So, anyway, you guys know those blue helmets? Speaking of body armor, those blue helmets we talk about, and that everybody has their individual concerns over, right? Well, let's and just so everybody knows, I just want to say something really quick here, okay? We have a really good community here, and I appreciate every single one of you. But I do find it interesting that on a night like tonight, I have, we have around like 600 people here, which is awesome, and the support is extremely appreciated. I have a lot of gratitude for the amount of people that show up to try to get some good information and just share their thoughts and ideas, especially here in the chat. But there are times where I'll have 1,200 people in here, right? And I'm not saying that, woe is me, where's my other friends, right? What I'm trying to say is it all depends on how I package these live streams. And when I get 1,200 people, it's all information-based, okay? It's all based on sharing scary stories or something like that. Right? Because, that's just reality. I don't know what else to say. But when I say, survival lesson from the mutiny you need to learn, what I'm telling you is something that you should probably keep in mind and try to learn in order to become better prepared. Half the people show up. Because, man, I don't care about learning something. I just want to know what's on fire. Right? So keep all that in mind just because it is something that we need to kind of work on in our community. All of you here are great and obviously have it figured out in the sense of what you should probably be trying to do. It's not just about information. It's about intelligence, right? Actionable intelligence is information that you can use to better strategize or better prepare yourself for whatever you have coming afterward, right? Versus information is just that. If you don't use it or have a way to use it, then it doesn't really do much for you besides, serotonin. So I wanted to mention that because I just kind of noticed that looking at the numbers, and I was like, I do find that interesting. I honestly think that that's like the main driver here is just because it was packaged like a lesson, like a lesson plan rather than a fear fest, right? So, Talon Morrison, no, I have never served in the U.S. military. I have never been in law enforcement. I am legitimately just like some regular guy, okay? But I do my best to research what I can to understand it, and I ask questions because I never claim to be an expert. I don't have that background, so I guess at the bare minimum, the one positive you could say about that is I don't have any certain bias because of that background, maybe. But I do talk to people who have those types of backgrounds and ask them lots of questions because they have a lot of experience that I personally don't. So I do understand where my experience level is, and then I try to keep that in mind when I'm presenting information, because I don't try to, I don't claim to be something I'm not, I guess. Okay, so let's see here. Blue helmets. Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you think they're coming to America? I don't know, but here's something I would keep in mind. This is like a little bit of a interesting correlation of what's going on right now. But if you're worried about the UN and they ever show up, just be aware that that's probably going to be a long time before they're gone. I mean, unless things get spicy, let's just say. But here's what we're talking about, okay? And I want to share this with you because there are some things happening in Eastern Europe right now that pertain to this. Mali doesn't need UN peacekeeping mission. Political analyst. Analyst! It's the word I prefer over analyst, okay? And anyone who thinks otherwise should just go work for CNN. Because Newsmax can hire me as their political analyst if they'd like. And luckily for them, that connotation doesn't really have any meaning, which means anything I say can't really be held against them. Per Osimhen says the organization's troops in the West African nation are not fighting terrorism. Mali needs a new strategy when it comes to the fight against terrorism, not a detached United Nations peacekeeping mission, Pan-African political analyst Per Osimhen has argued. The United Nations multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali, MINUSMA, was established in 2013 in response to the Tuareg rebellion in the northern part of the country. Speaking to RT, Osimhen suggested that reasons for the continued presence of MINUSMA were unclear, as it appears to serve the self-interests of various armed groups rather than actively combating terrorism in the West African country. What is the need for a useless mission that only follows the selfish interests of different armed groups? There's no reason for their existence in Mali, he insisted, adding that they are not involved in the fighting. Okay? In Mali, and this is like from just, a couple days ago? No, this is from today, okay? This is happening like right now. They want them gone. They've been there for 10 years. Still there, okay? Now, where is the UN operating right now? Because that kind of gives you an idea as to like what part of the world they're all in right this second, okay? They have peacekeeping operations all over Africa, in the Middle East, of course, over here. We have some over here near India and Pakistan, and then we also have Kosovo, okay? Kosovo. Well, what's going on in Kosovo? Well, yeah, it's an Eastern European nation. Let's talk about that for a minute, because it's interesting what's going on in Kosovo right now, in case you weren't aware. But why would you? Everyone talks about Ukraine. So, UNMIK, United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo, established June 1999. So this one's been going on for 24 years. So listen, once the UN shows up, once the blue helmets show up, they stick around for quite a while. You should be aware of that and prepared for it in case that ever becomes a reality wherever you are. Not everybody here in the chat's American. We have Canadians here, we have Australians, we have people in the UK, we have people all over Europe, and that's awesome. We have people in other places too, but generally I see the analytics, I know where everybody comes from. You might get the UN in your country one day. They ain't leaving, okay? Originally, the Security Council, by its resolution 1244 of 10th of June 1999, authorized the Secretary General to establish an international civil presence in Kosovo, the United Nations Interim Administration and Mission in Kosovo, UNMIK, in order to provide an interim administration for Kosovo under which the people of Kosovo could enjoy substantial autonomy. Under of which they could enjoy autonomy. Interesting how they worded that, isn't it? Its task was unprecedented in complexity and scope. The Council vested UNMIK with authority over the territory and people of Kosovo, including all legislative and executive powers and administration of the judiciary. So, for 24 years, the UN has been running Kosovo, and they're literally like the government there. And the reason they stepped in was because there was such a civil domestic issue happening in Kosovo, especially between Serbia, where they had so much unrest and upheaval that the UN found it necessary to go in and establish order. Basically, I just simplified that really, really fast. So, why does that matter? Well, first off, I mean, if you're ever in a country that suddenly loses its established governing bodies, maybe the UN will step up and take over, and you can live under them with lots of autonomy, but they'll control the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches in the meantime. So, what could go wrong, right? And then also be aware of the fact that like 24 years later, they're still going to be there. And what's happening in Kosovo is now creating issues for the West, which is something else to keep in mind. See, we're not just talking about these things that are happening. I'm trying to paint a picture so everyone can understand what some of the threats and issues are around the world right now. When you have people literally in charge of countries for periods of time that the people underneath them have no say in, that's a concern, especially when it's still happening right now today, and especially when this whole blue helmet situation keeps seemingly popping up. I'm not sure what's going on. Kosovo-Serbia conflict creates fear of escalation in tense Europe. Okay? A growing conflict between Kosovo and Serbia is threatening to become a major crisis for the U.S. and Western leaders who are already responding to the largest land war in Europe since World War II. This article came out 3 days ago. Okay? With a war raging in Ukraine, Washington is trying to deftly navigate a series of violent clashes and boiling tensions in the independent state of Kosovo, which remain unresolved more than a month after the conflict erupted. Last week, the standoff grew worse after neighboring Serbia, which placed its combat forces on high alert, arrested 3 Kosovan police officers and ignored international calls to release them. Kosovo responded to the arrest by closing its borders with Serbia, okay? Not Siberia, not Syria, Serbia. Meanwhile, the heads of both countries are refusing to negotiate with each other, setting off an emergency in the Western Balkans at the worst time possible for Western leaders. John Fleck, the senior director of the Atlantic Council's Europe Center, said the conflict could grow worse, even as he is cautiously optimistic it could be resolved diplomatically. No one in Washington, Brussels, Paris, or Berlin needs another source of major insecurity or conflict in Europe. There is real concern about the situation. Some analysts, not analysts, are also worried that Russia, which has never recognized the independence of Kosovo and maintains historically close ties to Serbia, could use the crisis to spread more disinformation. That's their biggest concern? Really? Honestly? Moscow, which launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year, has repeatedly accused NATO of committing atrocities after intervening in a deadly war between Kosovo and Serbia decades ago. Amid the current tensions, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov last month called the situation alarming and pinned the blame on the West. A major explosive situation is brewing in the heart of Europe, Lavrov said, according to Russian state-run media outlet TASS. The West has embarked on a course of total subjugation of all those in any way express their own opinion. So, the Kosovo situation hasn't necessarily improved. And in fact, right now, it's boiling over, according to Lavrov and according to those who are in the know, which means there could be another conflict in that exact part of Europe at any moment now. And that's just not a good thing, is it? So, things aren't getting better over there. In fact, it looks like conflict is getting worse, even in places where we're not focused on. And if you notice, Kosovo isn't necessarily in this, huge amount of the news cycle. People aren't really talking about it a whole lot. But the UN runs the country and is literally in, a civil conflict while also dealing with Serbia. So, can the UN take over a country and then go to war with that country's people? I mean, I don't know how that works, but that looks like it's what's happening. So keep your eyes on everything that's happening. It's not just Ukraine. Europe is falling apart, and it has been for a while. Let's be honest. It's maybe run its course in many ways, right? When it comes to what the countries have done to themselves, based on their political decisions and ideologies, especially based on the demographic changes that they've experienced over the last couple of decades. Many of those countries are no longer able to operate as a sovereign nation any longer, or in the same vein that they used to operate in. For example, consider France and the amount of no-go zones that exist within there now, right? I mean, that's when a country or a state begins to fail, is when there's parts of their own country that they can't even go to due to dangers that await them, right? So Europe not doing well in general, not just Ukraine. The whole continent is having a hard time. There are some countries that are fine, or countries that probably be fine, but there are many that are not doing very well. And Kosovo is basically in a war right now and has been under wartime leadership for 24 years, and somehow it's just not even like in the news cycle. So keep that in mind. Okay, now, AZ Desert Rat. I thought the UN was a peacekeeping alliance. Aha! Yeah, they do that, don't they? They peacekeep for sure. And, so glad they're there to help with all that because, without them, what would anyone do? I don't know. All right. They remind me of like a corporate team that comes in to fix a company's franchise that's just not doing well. And so they show up and they force everyone to do everything by the book. And then when nothing actually changes, they blame everyone who's there already. And then they leave and then they fail. Right? So that's what it reminds me of. Now, Western Wanderer, I'm 4 years till retirement. I'm going to be so pissed if it all goes up in smoke. I will be pissed for you as well. I hope that doesn't happen, but I definitely don't have a lot of faith in our financial institutions right now. I'm not going to lie to you. So hopefully you have good people around you and good, advice when it comes to people who are actually, qualified to advise you on financial decisions, because that's not me. And you know what? There are people who make a living doing that and actually do give out good advice, but don't listen to your cousin's uncle. That's never the best idea. So, all right, now, what's going on in China and Taiwan? Here's another lesson to learn. See, we're learning lessons tonight. I hope everybody is taking something from this, because the 580 of you that have been pretty steady here all night, you're the people we need in this community in the sense of wanting to learn. And all of you here on the replay coming in after to listen because it's either too late at night for you or you got to work a job or whatever it is, thanks for doing that as well. Thanks for being here and part of the community. It really matters because, we're going to do an experiment one week. And you all will know about it because you're here. But the experiment will be I'll make some preposterous thumbnail and clickbait title and just see how many people we can get in. And that way we'll know what's legit going on, all right? Also, I was actually watching Star Wars Theory's live stream here before that because I am a nerd at heart, don't get me wrong. And it was interesting because he said, hey, I got the special guest, waiting to join, and as long as you guys hit the like button, I get 1,500 likes, I'll have him come in. So everyone went through and hit the like button, we got him up to 1,500 likes, and then guess what? He didn't have a special guest, it was all a ploy. And then the best part about it was that everybody unliked. And the second they unliked, they dropped his likes from 1,500 all the way back down to 1,100 within seconds. And so watching his reaction to that was so priceless because that's what you get, man. Don't play with our hearts, I wouldn't do that to you guys, all right? I'm going to do the other thing, but not to you because you're here now and you know about it, all right? Viv B, I'm sorry about you wanting coffee now because of me. It's not necessarily what I'm trying for here, I promise. But I do like my late night coffee, all right? I really do. So, majority of Americans support increasing U.S. military presence near Taiwan to combat China threat. Poll. And just so you guys know, you see this ad over here, I did just grab a new pair of Merrells, and I'm pretty excited about it because I've been looking for this do-all shoe. I'm a prepper, right? I want things to be everything all in one. Jack of all trades, master of none. I think I might have found it. I'll let everybody know on the next live stream or something, but I'm pretty excited about it. So, when you wear a size 15, you're limited, okay? And I do bring that up relatively regularly because people make suggestions to me about shoes without realizing that there are some parameters involved. A majority of Americans support an increase to U.S. military's presence around Taiwan as a democratic island faces an increased threat from China, new poll indicates. More than half of Americans, 56%, said that they would support an increase in U.S. military presence as a way to discourage China from invading Taiwan, and 30% indicated they would oppose such a move. So, 56% are fine with going to war with China, 30% are not, and then the other 14% just didn't say anything apparently. Here's my thoughts on that. The 56% don't want to lose their comfortable lifestyle. I don't blame them. If we get cut off from China, life's going to suck hard for a long time. Okay? Do I want to be dependent on China? Not at all. Do I think we are at this point in time, based on the way our economy works and based on the way that our population has grown accustomed to these amenities? Yeah. And here in the preparedness community, I mean, we're a relatively patriotic bunch. You know, we have our thoughts when it comes to being proud Americans, and I'm sure many of you in Canada and other countries feel similarly, at least in the sense of probably wanting to be here instead. I'm just going to say it. Who cares? But what I will say is that I don't want to deal with the rest of the population if we get cut off from China. And I think that's something you should definitely keep in mind. It's not just about us, right? We would be like, okay, well, let's hunker down. We're going to get all these American jobs back online. We're going to get manufacturing back into business, and we're going to buy all American. It's going to be great. It's going to cost more money. Don't care. I'll spend it. It's worth it to support the country, and we're going to get through this. And on the other side, it'll be a more powerful, more self-sustaining nation, and everybody will benefit from it because of the amount of gumption that we had to begin with, right? I think, yeah, at minimum, 75% of this country doesn't have that. They don't have that willingness. And some of them, in all honesty, and I'm sure some of you in the chat feel this way too, some of us don't have that capability. And I mean that, like, in all reality. Like, I don't discount the fact that not everybody can just spend more money, right? Not everybody can just buy more expensive stuff just to support something American-made, right? Someone who is on a very tight budget can't suddenly increase their budget by 30% just because. Like, to them, that means sacrificing 30%, right? And I understand that completely. So that's why we don't want this to actually happen. We don't. China taking Taiwan over in the sense of controlling everything about them is not good for us either. But going to war with China, also not good for us. It's a tough one. Now, what are we learning from this situation? Well, first off, we're learning that most Americans are fine with going to war with China, at least 56% according to that poll. So that's great, because they have probably no idea about what the consequences would be, but that's fine. And then, here's what else we're going to talk about. Taiwan arrests 4 current and former military officers for spying for China. Okay, this is from January 5th, but the next article is going to be much more recent. Okay, Taiwan has detained a retired Air Force captain and 3 other active military officers for allegedly spying for China. The former officer, surnamed Liu, left the military in 2013 and was involved in businesses with China, where he was allegedly hired to build an espionage ring using his connections in the military. Prosecutors believe Mr. Liu recruited at least 6 officers into his team and received rewards of 200,000 somethings and 700,000 other somethings from Beijing. The semi-government Central News Agency reported. Semi-government? That's quite a euphemism if I've ever heard one. But here's the thing to keep in mind from this. Taiwan has had espionage in their military. Spies in their military who have been arrested and prosecuted. Okay? So, are there spies in our military? Yeah. Are there spies in your mag? Not yet. Will there be? Probably. I hate to say it, but somebody always cracks, man. It's not going to be me. I'm just going to say that in case anybody was just suddenly going to end up in my group. All right. What about spy bases? Well, it's not just spy bases in Cuba. China could be sending troops right to Florida's doorstep. What? What do you mean? Yeah, we're doing old 1960s again. China is planning a new joint military training facility in Cuba. At 100 miles off Florida's coast, the facility would put China's troops at Florida's doorstep. Intelligence officials told the Journal China's move is likely a response to U.S.'s involvement in Taiwan. China is planning to set up a new joint military training facility in Cuba. The officials told the Journal that the facility could allow China to house troops permanently on the island and broaden its intelligence gathering against the U.S. The new facility in Cuba would be just 100 miles off Florida's coast and effectively allow China to station troops right at the Sunshine State's doorstep. I don't think that's a good idea, do you? No. but they're probably going to do it. So the big question there comes in with, do we let them do it? Do you do something proactively to prevent that? I'm pretty sure we have stuff in Cuba, don't we? Isn't that where Guantanamo Bay is? How is this going to work? How does that work, right? So China's a problem, like a big problem. And all this talk about Russia and their nukes and everything else is more likely to remain a European problem than an American problem. That's just my opinion based on the last year and a half of what's been going on. But China is our problem, like more than anyone else's. They're a problem. The other countries that China's working with don't care. Most of them are crap holes anyway, so they appreciate the money, and they appreciate China just doing whatever, right? Their roads initiative that they're doing in Africa, they're just dumping money into poor countries. Those countries don't care. They don't care about like their sovereignty or authoritarianism or tyrannical law or anything like that. They're like, yeah, money, thank you. So China's our problem. Russia's Europe's problem mostly. Yes, there's always us, but like they don't want to deal with us. Not really. They'd be better off dealing with Europe. China might want to deal with us. So, what else is going on with China? Well, let's talk about how their spies work. The reason I want you to understand this is because this is how we have already been infiltrated. And this is how China approaches things. So you should be aware of it so you can maybe catch it during some type of a crisis scenario. This is how they approach espionage. And this is why you should be considering this, especially in some sort of like post-conflict scenario, okay? China's misunderstood spies. This is an article from 2011, so maybe there's a little bit less bias. But I want you guys to keep this in mind, okay? This month, Moscow, Russia, publicly announced its Federal Security Service had detained a Chinese spy, Tong Shenyang, who the Russians say they caught attempting to purchase a documentation for the S-300 surface-to-air missile. The case has puzzled observers because Beijing had already purchased the S-300 system several years ago and started fielding its own knockoff. Speculation has abounded over why the Chinese intelligence services would waste their time stealing details of a system they already possessed. The mechanics of Tong's case are less important, however, than what it says about Chinese intelligence services and their operations, or at least foreign perceptions of that threat. Most analysts believe the Chinese intelligence threat is largely amorphous, a vast human network vacuuming up many bits of information. China's seemingly unique approach to intelligence is known by various names, including human wave, mosaic, or the 1,000 grains of sand approaches to intelligence. Ultimately, it's a view of Chinese operations fundamentally at odds with normal understandings of intelligence. You see why this sentence got me all twisted? There are three major assumptions about this approach. First and most importantly is that Chinese intelligence officers don't rely on the traditional tradecraft of clandestine collection, such as paying or blackmailing for secrets. Second, that their secret services rely on the efforts of ethnic Chinese emigres and citizenry abroad rather than the willingness of foreign citizens to betray the trust afforded them. And third, that the Chinese intelligence services play a secondary role relative to large informal networks of amateurs, vacuuming up information irrespective of Beijing's economic, military, and political priorities. But this is really an accurate picture. The Tong case suggests Chinese spies work much as others do. Covered as a translator for Chinese delegations, Tong tried to find Russians venal enough to accept payment for classified documents. Both the cover and the method are time-honored hallmarks of espionage, whatever cultural or operational tradition analysts choose from which to draw. So, what they're saying is, China doesn't care what the intelligence is. They don't care what the information is. They're just going to take all of it. Okay? It's very much like data brokers on the internet. They don't care who you are. They don't care if you have money in the bank. They don't care what ethnicity you are or anything. They're going to take any bit of data they can about you, and they're going to stash it away. And maybe they'll use it at a later time. Maybe they'll use it to leverage something in the future. But regardless, they're going to stash it into some kind of drive somewhere and just keep it there forever. The databases that China has on the world are enormous. They're huge. So their approach is to just take all data. To them, all data has value. So when we talk about the Chinese balloons floating over the country, everyone's like, oh, they probably got our power grid mapped out, and oh, they probably figured out some of our missile silos, and oh, they probably figured out some of our military installations. They probably figured out what kind of bird flies around Dave's house in Montana. They probably figured out what kind of color the trees are at that time of year. They probably figured out how many populations of squirrels there are in, Glacier National Park, right? Like, it doesn't matter to them what the information was. They got it, and they're keeping it, and they're going to use it for something. And that's what you should really keep in mind. And that's what we're going to be looking at in the future in a fifth-generation warfare situation. You won't see operatives on the ground, right, when it comes to China. You'll see regular people buying fast food and then taking a picture of the menu and sending it back home because what are those food prices like right now? That's data, that's information, and somehow also espionage. So, and look, that was a very basic example, but you understand what I'm trying to say. Anything can be used if it can be correlated to something else, right? And so what they're doing is they're painting a bigger picture by using all these tiny pieces of data points and then putting them together into a full picture as to what it is they're trying to accomplish. And that's how their approach is going to work. And that's what you'll have to watch out for in the future if we ever find ourselves in a conflict with China. Because that vacuum cleaner approach is very hard to identify, and you'll get caught up in it very easily depending on who you associate with or where you go, right? If you're out in public on a regular basis and you're in a populated area, you're probably going to get scanned by some Chinese spy, either using an RFID reader, either just taking photos or video of the area. Who knows what it is? And if you're prominent in any sense of the word, in the sense of you're a politician, you're in law enforcement, you're a military veteran, you're a firearms instructor, you're a banker, you're somebody who deals with, food supplies, if you're somebody who has a company that's well known, all those things could qualify you for being worthy data for said espionage missions. And so those are things you should keep in mind, okay? Look, Semper Fi NY, I am appreciative of you being here. You have a great night as well. Andy on Guam, recently I saw an article about 4 million Chinese fled since COVID or some other large number. First off, no doubt about it. And second off, where'd they go? And what's their priority? I mean, we have a huge illegal immigrant population from China in this country already, right now. Even if 1% of them are related to the Chinese government, that's a lot. That's a lot. Okay? Doomsayer says, China blends in with the U.S. We don't blend in at all. Not really sure you can win in that scenario. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, we definitely don't blend in very well. We are just what we are. Which is why we have to have this information in our heads, right? We have to be aware of this stuff because it gives us better tools to use for protecting ourselves and, I mean, at some point possibly protecting our communities, which eventually could spread to larger portions of the country for all we know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how things are going to play out. But I do know that I don't want to live under tyrannical rule of some foreign entity. I don't want to live under tyrannical rule of some domestic entity. And I don't want to let people walk all over me. So if that scenario ever unfolds one way or the other, we have to use the tools we have to make the best decisions in order to survive that situation. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here, is discuss current events, apply them to our preparedness, learn lessons from what's happening right now, and take it to the bank. Also, keep in mind, if you weren't here for the start of the conversation, a big takeaway from tonight's live stream was don't be like the Russian people who are greeting the Wagner group with open arms, taking selfies, taking videos, and putting their faces along with this, according to Russia, traitorous mutiny, and then 24 hours later, they're done, they're gone, they're not even in the country anymore, and now you're still there with your face all over the internet going, yeah, down with Russia. Probably a bad idea. Even here in the U.S., that would be a bad idea, regardless of how you felt, okay? If the Marine Corps said, we've had enough, and we're taking back the country, but the Air Force and the Army and the Navy were like, no, that's crazy, we can't do that, right? And this is just ridiculously hypothetical. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're out there bravoing the Marine Corps and taking pictures with them, and then they lose, or they say, never mind, you're right, we're not going to do that, who knows what happens to you after, right? So keep all those things in mind. I want to learn from these situations, not just talk about them. And I hope that that's what everyone, takes away from these conversations. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for tonight. I think we did good. So, like I said, tonight's affiliate sponsor link is going to be Premier Body Armor. I'll put that in the chat. I just think it's a good idea to have armor of some kind. You guys can check me on Subscribestar if you would like. I had a video I recorded for my Subscribestar peeps, and the audio did not record at all. And it turns out if I have a lapel microphone on and I'm laying on my stomach and crushing the lapel mic, you don't get any audio. So that was good to learn. So shooting from the prone and recording with a lapel mic, not a thing apparently. Good to know. I'll fix it for next time. I have a new video coming out for my Subscribestar people here soon. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate everybody's support. I really do. This community is one that I'm very grateful to be a part of, because I think any other community on the internet is going to be a lot more toxic and a lot less supportive. And here I feel very proud to be here. I really do. So thank you guys so much. Welcome to my life. Thank you as always as well. Bees Nuts, thanks so much for being here. Travis Rose, you can make it work. I hope you do, and there's a lot to figure out these days. So anything else y'all need, you know what to do. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.